Hello, I have decided to switch up the background for this video because I don't want to sit on the floor today. It's too cold. I just want to sit on my couch underneath my doona. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to review a lot of films today. One of these films actually came out last week. Some of them are out this week. One is going to come out next week. Let's just start with the biggest film of this week, which is obviously Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. I find it very hard to take any film with Part 1 in it seriously, mainly because I'm getting flashbacks to when there was a trend of adapting the last book in a series into 2 parts. Obviously, Harry Potter, Twilight, and The Hunger Games all did it, all to the detriment of the films, I would argue. But there seems to be a resurgence of a trend. Obviously, these aren't adaptations, but Fast X was the beginning of apparently a trilogy, and this is obviously the beginning of at least 2 parts of this story. So I've only ever seen the first Mission Impossible, and I genuinely fell asleep during it. I'm sure that was mainly a me thing. I do often fall asleep on the couch. As I'm mainly watching films alone now, I usually am able to just pause the film and return to it when I've had my nap, but I remember I was watching this with my sister, so that wasn't so much of an option. I've heard that the first few Mission Impossible films are quite disparate with each other, and it was only when Christopher McQuarrie, the director, came on board with these films that they started having more of a coherence to them. I won't even attempt to try and explain the plot because I really didn't understand it. There's something about a key that has to fit in with another key that is the key to this big AI algorithm thing that has the potential for anyone who has control of it to take over the world. That is the gist of it. And I personally don't think I needed to know much more because the point of these films is to be impressed at Tom Cruise doing lots of stunts. And this film absolutely achieved that. The action sequences are incredibly entertaining. I still feel like it's hard to really feel how much effort goes into the stunts because we're so used to CGI and we're so used to things being fake that I honestly didn't feel like this film visually was able to indicate that this was all very real. I think it's just the glossiness that a lot of big films have now that makes it feel that way compared to watching an older action film. There are a lot of really great actors in this film. I didn't realize that this was actually Hayley Atwell's first film in the franchise. I follow her on Instagram and so have known that she has been working on Mission Impossible for many years now. It's just that it's actually taken about 4 years for this film to actually make it to the screen. I thought she was really great, and her and Tom Cruise, or Ethan Hunt is his character's name, have a great banter relationship with each other. There is actually some quite comedic moments amidst the action, which I really enjoyed. It felt like the film was able to not take itself too seriously at points, and even Tom Cruise is not taking Ethan Hunt too seriously at some points as well, which I was a bit surprised by. There's so much going on and so many characters that it is hard for anyone else to really shine in the film, I think. Esai Morales as the bad guy was pretty good. He's very delightfully evil, and I thought Vanessa Kirby as this, she's sort of a villain but sort of not character. She's clearly having a lot of fun with the very affected personality of this character. It was definitely too long, and I'm definitely still not a fan of it only being part 1. I don't want to have to watch another 2.5-hour film to get resolution, and I really hope this trend does not stick. I think you can very easily have a series that is interconnecting while also still having certain amounts of resolution within each film. I think it's just a little bit lazy, and you may as well be making a TV series if you want to do that, in my opinion. Mostly throughout this film, I really enjoyed the action sequences and kind of had a bit of a nap during the scenes where they were actually telling the plot. There was one scene that had me and my friend in stitches, and I don't think anyone else was laughing. This film was very clearly filmed in the UK for some of it, and there is one scene where you have a room full of very famous British actors, famous in terms of the UK but not famous internationally, and they're all doing American accents, including Carrie Elwes, who I love and is again looking handsome in a suit and a waistcoat, as he was in a Guy Ritchie film earlier this year. But then you also have Rob Delaney, who is an American but lives in the UK and is in a lot of British stuff and probably is only famous in the UK. And he's obviously just doing his normal accent, and for some reason that contrast, my friend and I just thought that was so funny. I can definitely see why people love these films so much. Very fun, very entertaining. I'm still never going to be fully on board with Tom Cruise though, because he's part of a weird cult, and I don't think we should ever forget that. Also out this week is a new Australian film called The New Boy. This is directed by Warwick Thornton, who's quite an acclaimed Australian director, and it stars Cate Blanchett as a nun on a mission out in kind of some wheat fields in Australia in the what looks like the 1940s. This new boy, played by Aswin Reed, is sent to this missionary, and we very quickly find out that he can do magic. He is able to make light fly around him, and he's also able to heal things. And when Cate Blanchett's nun finds this out, she gets very excited because I think she pretty much thinks he's like either a sign from God or the new Jesus or something like that. I wasn't entirely sure because I'm not very well versed in religious stuff, so probably a lot of the religious iconography or themes in this film were quite lost on me. I felt the setup of this film was very intriguing. It's really beautifully shot as well. Everything is so aesthetically pleasing to look at, despite there being a lot of hardship clearly to the way they're living. But you have Cate Blanchett and Deborah Mailman, two nuns who are genuinely looking after this group of Aboriginal boys. While we're obviously aware that these children have more than likely been forcefully taken away from their families, you sort of slowly find out as well that there used to be a priest living on the mission, and that he should have been replaced, but they're pretending that he's still around, which I thought was a really fascinating addition to Cate Blanchett's nun, who's a very strange character, but that aspect was really not explored that much. And actually I felt like a lot of the setup of this film was wasted a little bit because it became quite repetitive as it really got into the middle of the film. You're mainly just watching this new boy who is unable to speak English slowly learn about Christianity and about the way that they want him to live on this mission and interpret things in his own unique way, relating it to the way that he sees the world work as dictated by his own culture. The central theme of the film is that Christianity and white colonialism has taken away Aboriginal culture, taken away Aboriginal magic. And as much as that's a very important theme, I felt it was quite an obvious one in the end. I was kind of expecting the film to be saying a bit more or investigating a bit more, considering its length and considering all the different things that it set up in the beginning. I really thought by the end of it we would be finding out just something else alongside that. And when I realized right at the end that that was all the film had been leading to, I was a little bit disappointed. The performances are all incredible, and as I said, the visuals, the cinematography, quite amazing. I was definitely just a bit disappointed with this film because I think it had so much potential and it just kind of got a bit stuck along the way as the film went along in a strange repetitive rhythm rather than exploring everything as fully as it could have. A film I did end up really enjoying that is out this week is called The Ordinaries. This is a German film, and the conceit of this film makes it sound like it could be really naff. So I'm incredibly impressed that this film managed to be as good and as interesting as it is. This film is set in a sort of, I guess you could call it dystopian world, but it's a different world where everyone is a character in a film. You're either a main character or a supporting character, or you're an outtake, which means you don't get to be in the film at all. These are very obvious metaphors for class, but this film's dedication to using the metaphor of cinema so impressive that you can't help but get swept along into this world. We follow the character of Paula. Her father is a main character, or so she's been told, as he apparently died. So Paula is at main character school, learning to be a main character. All the main characters have these like heart things that monitor their emotions, and so when they are feeling really big emotions, they play certain types of music. They can make things rain when they're really sad, that kind of thing. Paula begins to be quite curious about her father. She soon realizes that things are not as she has been told by her mother and gets mixed up in the world of the outtakes. These outtakes are like people who are stuck in jump cuts, or there's a woman who constantly has an audience like laughing or clapping like she's in a sitcom whenever she says anything. There's also miscast people. So there's a man who plays a maid in her friend's very wealthy house. A lot of these things become metaphors for trauma or being queer and being outcast because of that, but it's never too in your face. The film very much leaves it up to you to figure out what these metaphors are. You can fully just enjoy this film for a piece of science fiction or fantasy and just be very swept up in this world. I just so much enjoyed the world building of this story. I think it would make such a great TV show. I feel like you could tell so many stories in this world. The casting in the film is so interesting in that the girl who plays Paula is someone who wouldn't necessarily be cast as the lead in the film. She is someone who, visually speaking, does look like she would be the best friend character, the supporting character. I think a lot of films that contain a lot of world building often set it up at the beginning and then kind of leave it behind as they get into the plot and into the story, but this film kept it up throughout the whole runtime, and a lot of these sort of references were properly weaved into the plot. It is a simple metaphor about differences should be celebrated and anyone should have the opportunity to be the main character in their own story, but it's done in such a fun and imaginative way. It almost feels like something you would more see in a YA novel, but obviously works much better as a film. I should say it's not really referencing specific films as such, it's more referencing genres, but more so the technicalities behind film or the theory behind filmmaking that you might learn at university. If it sounds like something you would enjoy, I would highly recommend it. A film that actually came out last week is Reality. This stars Sydney Sweeney and is based off the play that the director Tina Satter wrote and has now turned into a film. The film's dialogue is entirely based on the transcript of a real-life FBI interrogation that happened at this woman Reality's home. It's so incredibly fascinating to watch actors act out real things that people said. They'll start a sentence and then stop and say it a different way. You can have the mood change completely from one moment to another, as it can do in real life in a conversation. All the actors in this film do such an incredible job. The two men who play the sort of main FBI agents that interview Reality are so good in that you can never quite tell whether you can trust them or not. There's such a sense of unease that is there the whole time. And of course, unless you have, I guess, researched the film beforehand or already know about the events of the film, you don't know what Reality has done or they are accusing her of having done until quite towards the end. Sydney Sweeney is so incredible in this. One of the performances of the year so far. You have this very real sense of all these men, because all the FBI agents are men, completely overwhelming her house and towering over her. She's such a small, petite person. It's a really humorous film in places too, in a sort of dark, wry way. And again, it's quite impressive that you manage to get all these emotions without changing one line of dialogue from what actually happened. There are sections of the film where people sort of disappear for a second because what they have said has been redacted, which adds to the sort of unreality of the situation. The fact that this woman's name really is Reality Winner and how the name Reality so perfectly aligns with the themes is also quite incredible. I almost feel like I don't want to spoil it because for me, going in not actually knowing anything about the real story added a lot to my experience of watching it. I feel like in America this is probably much more well known, and what she did is quite extraordinary, and it's so fascinating to think about her character. She's someone who is in the army. She has a pink gun in her house. She also really likes Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind because you see stickers from that film around her house. She sort of repeatedly says that she wanted to be in the army because she wanted to protect her country, defend her country, whatever that actually means. She's clearly very much not a left-leaning type of person, and yet she was so frustrated of what was happening at the time. It happened during the time Trump was president. She really is the last person you would expect to do something like what she did. Such a lot going on in the film. There's so much you could dissect and discuss. Definitely one of my films of the year so far. Lastly, I want to talk about Daliland, which comes out next Thursday on July 13th. This is a new film from Mary Harron, who was the director of American Psycho. So I was quite curious to see it because I think American Psycho is such a well-directed film and is a film that would be so different if another person had directed it, i.e. a man. So this is about Salvador Dali. It's set during the 70s when he's sort of later in his career but still painting, still very famous. And it's told from the point of view of a young gallery assistant who sort of gets swept up in what is called Daliland, which is just this cohort of people he has around him, including his wife Gala. I knew nothing about Salvador Dali, aside from knowing his most famous paintings, obviously, so I did find this film interesting in that respect. However, it is an incredibly mundane by the book biopic of a famous person. The framing of viewing this famous person through the sort of young fan's eyes is incredibly tedious, I think. You certainly learn all the facts and all the stuff that you could probably read on Wikipedia about Dali, but I felt like I never learnt anything about why he painted and why he painted what he did, why he wanted to paint in surrealism. The film was very much focused on his relationship with his wife, how tumultuous it was, especially at that time, because they were both sort of having relationships with other people, and while they both accepted that, it also made both of them very jealous of each other at the same time. It was also about how people around Dali were kind of making money out of him in some dodgy ways, though I never felt like that was fully explained, and I still found that a bit confusing. Maybe because no one really knows why Salvador Dali painted the way he did, the filmmakers decided to kind of stay away from that because they didn't want to make a guess, but that's really the main thing that I wanted to know. And while the other stuff is kind of interesting in a sort of historical perspective, watching them have lots of parties and argue with each other about how he needs to be painting in a kind of repetitive way just really wasn't that interesting. The film also awkwardly has Ezra Miller playing a young Dali in like 3 flashbacks. It felt a little bit strange even having those flashbacks, to be honest. I don't think they were needed necessarily. They provided some background to Dali and Gala's relationship. I feel they could have even reshot those scenes, considering. I completely forgot to mention Ben Kingsley plays Dali, and he's very good at it, and he looks a lot like Dali in the film. It feels like a bit of a waste of potential because clearly he had a very fascinating life, but I just don't think the way that this film decided to tell the story was very good. Those are my film reviews for this week. Let me know if you've seen any of them and your thoughts in the comments below. I will see you in my next video. Bye!